Imagine being raised by narcissistic parents. Yeah, the ones who gift you trauma for your birthday, then get offended when you unwrap it too slowly. You know the type. Mom needs you to be a reflection of her perfect Instagram life. Dad's approval is more elusive than a crypto millionaire filing taxes. They gaslight you, manipulate you, twist your words until you don't even trust your own memory. And if you ever try to call them out, you're too sensitive or disrespectful. But here's the sick part. You grow up thinking this is love. Now fast forward, you're 28, dating someone who gives you whiplash with compliments and criticism in the same sentence. You're wondering if you're the problem. You're not, but you are a magnet for narcissists because you were trained to be. And guess what? They're everywhere. Narcissistic bosses, friends, spouses, influencers, politicians, spiritual gurus. Even your dog might be love bombing you. So what the hell do we do about it? Let's talk about it. Through the lens of a book that doesn't just scratch the surface but takes a sledgehammer to the mirror society keeps gazing into. Welcome to the chaos. Today, we're diving deep into Surrounded by Narcissists by Thomas Erikson, a Swedish behavioral expert who's made a career out of helping people decode human dysfunction. He's also the guy behind Surrounded by Idiots, a runaway hit that basically taught you why Chad in accounting won't shut up and why your boss is emotionally constipated. But this is different. This one is about the people who are the main characters of the universe in their heads. The manipulators, the charmers, the emotional vampires who will bleed you dry and then cry that you made them do it. And let's get this out of the way. This video falls under the Fair Use Act for educational and transformative purposes. We're not here to regurgitate the book. We're here to rip it apart, reframe it, challenge it, and slap a mirror in your face. If you're here for sugar-coated psychology, go back to TikTok. This is for the people ready to stop being narcissistic supply and start taking their lives back. Buckle up. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The narcissism epidemic. Imagine this. You're in a room full of people, all of them speaking at once, but no one is listening. Everyone's too busy posing, promoting, performing. Welcome to 2025. The narcissism pandemic makes COVID-19 look like a warm-up act. Everyone's got a personal brand now, but no one has a soul. If your thoughts aren't being monetized, are they even real? Let's be clear, we're not just surrounded by narcissists, we're swimming in narcissism like goldfish in a bowl of filtered delusion. The word narcissist isn't even an insult anymore, it's a resume bullet point. Selfie addiction, normal. Inflated self-worth backed by zero talent, encouraged, validation junkies screaming into the algorithm for another hit of likes. That's just marketing yourself. We've dressed up pathology as personality. What Thomas Erikson does in this section isn't just define narcissism, he holds up the mirror and shoves your face in it. And if you're not uncomfortable yet, then congratulations, you're either a liar or you've already gone full Narcissus. Erikson starts with the obvious. Narcissism isn't a mental illness you can fix with a pill or therapy dog, it's a personality disorder. That's right, not a glitch. It's part of the operating system. Like your uncle who still thinks he's the next Gary Vee at 56, some people are just built wrong. He traces it back to the myth of Narcissus, the Greek god's cursed son who fell in love with his own reflection and essentially died of self-adoration. Cute story, but here's the kicker. That flower boy is all of us now. Thanks to phones, filters, and a digital culture obsessed with attention, we're not just admiring the reflection, we're polishing it, marketing it, branding it, monetizing it, and then demanding applause. And while the DSM's version of narcissism involves grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy, let's not get it twisted. You don't have to hit all the clinical checkboxes to be a narcissist. Erikson slaps us with a cold truth. Narcissistic behavior is spreading like a social STD. You don't need a diagnosis when society itself is grooming you to act like the main character of reality TV. He names the traits: inflated self-image, speaking only about yourself, arrogance, hypersensitivity to criticism, belief that rules don't apply to you. Sound like your boss? Your influencer crush? Maybe your ex? Or worse, maybe it's you. But don't worry, the book's not all doom and diagnostics. Erikson challenges the BS narrative that narcissists are just misunderstood victims of trauma. They hurt others because they're hurting. That old chestnut. Well, guess what? So does everybody else. And most people don't become manipulative, praise-hungry black holes. Let's not give them a pass. This chapter calls out the enablers too. The culture that worships attention, that treats self-importance as empowerment. We've built systems that reward narcissism. Social media is the church, likes a communion. The algorithm is good, and we've all become apostles of self-obsession. But the real tragedy, it's contagious. Erikson shows how even non-narcissistic people are beginning to mimic the behavior just to survive. Lie on your resume, flex on Instagram, pretend you're better than everyone else because that's what works. Narcissism has gone mainstream, and we've accepted the terms and conditions without reading the fine print. This behavior will erode your empathy, corrode your relationships, and eventually make you despise yourself. And here's the truth bomb no one wants to hear. It's not just them, it's us. You've done it. You've chased admiration. You've twisted a story to make yourself the hero. You've ignored someone else's pain because it didn't fit your narrative. So let's stop pretending narcissism is some rare disease. It's a damn lifestyle, and one we're choosing, even if unconsciously. So what's the takeaway? Wake up. Pay attention. Start auditing your behavior, because the next time you roll your eyes at a narcissist, you might be looking in the mirror. Key takeaway: narcissism isn't an anomaly. It's not a rare diagnosis. It's not something that happens over there to those people. It's here. It's systemic. It's the social currency of our time. And if you're not actively resisting it, you're probably already infected. Favorite quote: "We love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." Beyond narcissism, the dark triad unveiled. Alright, let's cut through the polite fluff again and plunge deeper into the darkness. Because if you thought narcissism was dangerous, wait till you meet its psychotic roommates. You think you've seen evil? That was just the welcome mat. Let's talk about the people who don't just suck the oxygen out of the room. They spike it with poison, gaslight you into thinking it's perfume, and then ask you why you're coughing. You don't need a horror movie. The dark triad is already living rent-free in your office, your relationships, and if you're unlucky, your mirror. Here's the brutal truth that Thomas Erikson doesn't tiptoe around. Narcissism isn't a lone wolf. It's part of a wolf pack, a toxic trifecta known as the dark triad, a holy, unholy trinity of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Each of them is nasty on its own, but together, it's psychological Chernobyl. First, Erikson takes a scalpel to this notion that everyone who's manipulative is just insecure. No, some people are manipulative because it's effective, because they enjoy control, because empathy is a bug in their system, not a feature. He reminds us, just because someone's got a winning smile and TED Talk energy doesn't mean they aren't quietly calculating how to ruin your life for a promotion or just for sport. Psychopathy, that charming monster in a designer suit, is where things start to go nuclear. You've probably worked with one, you just didn't know it yet. They're not drooling serial killers in basements, they're polished, persuasive, and disturbingly normal looking. But under the skin, nothing. Zero empathy, no guilt, no fear, just a cold, dead calculation. These people will exploit your trauma, use it against you, and then pretend you imagined it. They're the human equivalent of malware, designed to destroy, impossible to detect until it's too late. Erikson backs this up with Robert Hare's infamous psychopathy checklist, 20 brutal red flags that range from glib charm to criminal versatility. But you don't need a lab coat to spot them. You just need to stop explaining away red flags because they had a hard childhood or they're just passionate. Passion doesn't involve destroying people for fun. That's called being a predator. Then comes Machiavellianism, and here, Erikson really peels the mask off. This isn't impulsive like psychopathy. It's not vain like narcissism. This one is pure strategy. Chess, not checkers. These are the people who will smile in your face, say all the right things, and then slowly remove your safety net thread by thread until you're falling and they're giving a press conference about how shocked and saddened they are. Unlike psychopaths, Machiavellians choose their manipulation. It's deliberate, it's studied, and it's terrifyingly effective. These aren't the loud, look-at-me narcissists. They're the puppet masters, the ones who fake virtue to get votes, the ones who run toxic corporations while sponsoring charities, the ones who never raise their voice because they don't need to. They already own the room. Erikson's insight here is clear. The dark triad isn't about clinical diagnoses alone. It's a spectrum, a strategy, a blueprint for getting ahead at the expense of anyone who still believes in basic decency. And society? Society rewards them. They climb corporate ladders faster. They win elections. They dominate social media. Why? Because we mistake confidence for competence. Because we worship charisma more than character. Because we don't want leaders. We want performers. And if you're still thinking, I'd never fall for that, think again. You have. You probably are right now. That charming friend who always seems to shift the spotlight back to themselves. That manager who praises your work right before stealing credit. That date who mirrors your values and then mysteriously ghosted you right after getting everything they wanted. Congratulations, you've met the triad. Erikson's deeper point is this. We've created a world where these traits win, where emotional intelligence is mocked and power is fetishized, where being nice is seen as weakness and manipulation is rebranded as strategy. You don't have to be a narcissist, Machiavellian, or psychopath to survive, but you do have to know how to spot them. And if you don't, well, you're not in the game, you're the game. The scariest part? There are people who carry all three traits. These are the real-life supervillains, the emotional arsonists. They're rare, but not that rare. And if you've ever been left completely psychologically wrecked by someone who made you feel crazy, paranoid, worthless, or hollow, odds are you've already met one. So what do? You wise up, you grow your spine, you stop romanticizing red flags, and you realize this: just because someone's magnetic doesn't mean they're safe. Just because someone's successful doesn't mean they're good. And just because they make you feel like you're the problem doesn't mean they're right. You want to protect yourself? Stop assuming everyone has a heart just because they have a pulse. Key takeaway: the most dangerous people in society aren't hiding, they're performing. Narcissists crave applause, Machiavellians crave power, and psychopaths crave destruction. Sometimes you're not being too sensitive. Sometimes you're just the only one still sane in a room full of devils wearing name tags. Favorite quote: hell is empty and all the devils are here. Inside the mind of a narcissist. Let's talk about emotional intelligence, or more specifically, the complete and utter lack of it. If narcissists were superheroes, emotional depth would be their kryptonite. This is the part of the book where Thomas Erikson cracks open the cold, dead heart of narcissism and shows us what's not inside. Spoiler, it's empathy, it's self-awareness, it's vulnerability, all MIA. They don't feel in the way most of us do. They simulate, they perform, and if you can't spot the difference, you're the perfect target. Here's a hard pill to swallow. Narcissists don't just lack emotions, they mimic them. Like parrots trained to say, I love you, without having a clue what it means. They've watched you long enough to know how you should be treated, what love should sound like, and how a real person should respond. And then they copy-paste that script onto you like a chatbot trying to pass for human, and you fall for it, over and over. This emotional vacancy is not accidental, it's engineered. Erikson shows how narcissists spend their lives studying people, not to connect, but to control. Their knowledge of human behavior isn't empathy, it's strategy, it's warfare. While you're hoping for connection, they're scanning for leverage. And once they find it, the manipulation starts. The praise, the validation, the love bombing, none of it is real. It's bait. You're the catch. One of the most twisted truths the book highlights is this: narcissists understand emotion better than most. They just don't feel it. And that, ironically, is what gives them an edge. No emotional static, no moral hesitation, just pure, cold, tactical advantage. They'll tell you exactly what you want to hear while planning your emotional demolition behind the scenes. It's like playing poker against someone who can see your cards but never reveals theirs. So what does love mean to a narcissist? According to Erikson, it's simple. I love that you love me. That's it. Your affection is their mirror. You make them feel adored. You give them status, comfort, sex, resources, convenience, so they love you as long as the supply keeps flowing. The moment it dries up, so does the affection. Your value is transactional, conditional, temporary. You don't exist beyond your utility. And when you finally confront them, when the gaslighting stops working and the mask starts slipping, what do? They rage, they retaliate, because nothing triggers a narcissist like being ignored. Apathy is their emotional black hole. Love and hate they can handle. But indifference, that's nuclear. That's irrelevance. And to a narcissist, irrelevance is death. This is why arguments with narcissists spiral so fast. You're not disagreeing, you're wounding their fantasy self. Their ego is so fragile, so inflated, that even minor criticism becomes a personal attack. They respond like toddlers in tuxedos, screaming, flailing, and emotionally nuking everything around them. And if they can't win your affection, they'll settle for your misery. As long as you're reacting, they're winning. The worst punishment you can inflict? Silence. Here's another brutal insight. Narcissists know they're locked out of emotional depth. Erikson suggests that as they age, some narcissists begin to realize that they're missing something. Real connection, real love, the things they've faked their whole lives. And when that awareness hits, when they grasp that the human experience is happening without them, it can lead to depression. But don't feel too sorry for them. That flicker of awareness rarely turns into change, because that would require humility. And that, my friend, is the one emotion a narcissist will never know. You think the twisted part is how they manipulate you? No, the real horror is that they don't believe anything's wrong. They think you're the weak one, for feeling, for hoping, for expecting reciprocity. They see your emotional depth as a weakness to exploit, not a quality to respect. That's why they target empaths. They're not attracted to your soul, they're attracted to your supply. This section of the book is a red alert to anyone who still thinks they can fix a narcissist with enough love, enough patience, enough forgiveness. Newsflash, you are not a rehabilitation center, you're a vending machine. And once you run out of snacks, they'll walk to the next one. So let's stop romanticizing their brokenness. Stop trying to decode their cryptic half-affection. Stop writing poetry for someone who sees you as a stage prop. Narcissists aren't mysterious. They're empty, not deep, not misunderstood, just manipulative. Stop listening to what they say. Watch what they do. Their words are camouflage. Their patterns are the truth. Key takeaway. You cannot emotionally connect with someone who treats emotions like currency. Narcissists don't love. They extract. They don't bond. They bait. And if you're still waiting for the real them to show up, here's the bad news. You've already met them. That was the performance. Favorite quote, they will never experience true love. They know it exists, certainly, and they grasp the concept, but they are nonetheless forever shut out from it. It's not for them. The making of a narcissist. Let's not sugarcoat it. Narcissists aren't just born, they're built, brick by ego-inflated brick. And the blueprints? Oh, they're everywhere. In overindulgent parenting, in untreated trauma, in societies obsessed with shiny exteriors and Instagrammable moments. What Thomas Erikson does here is rip open the comfy myth that narcissists are just bad seeds. No, some of these monsters were raised, crafted like Picasso paintings made entirely of entitlement, excuses, and empty praise. Let's start where it hurts, childhood. The moment you tell your kid they're better than everyone else and never tell them no, congratulations. You've started manufacturing a narcissist. It's not complicated. Praise without limits, love without correction, ego without challenge. Parents who overinflate their child's self-worth while removing all consequence from their actions are basically turning their toddlers into tiny dictators. And it doesn't stop there. Overvalued kids, praised not for their effort or kindness, but just for existing, grow up thinking the world owes them a standing ovation just for waking up. And here's the real kicker. It's not just neglect that breeds narcissism, it's overprotection. When a child is constantly told they're special, flawless, destined for greatness, without any grounding in reality, they start to believe the lie. Erikson's terrifying observation is that overvaluation creates grandiose narcissists. You know the type. People who walk into rooms like they're doing the world a favor, who expect applause for basic human behavior, who lose their minds at the mere suggestion that they aren't the center of the universe. They're not confident, they're delusional. But wait, it gets darker. Trauma's in the mix too. The kid who learns early that feelings aren't safe, that vulnerability is punished, that love is conditional, well, that child learns to armor up. Empathy off, charm on. Feelings, bury them. Other people, tools. That's what Erikson calls narcissistic injury. A childhood so emotionally hostile that the only way to survive is to stop feeling altogether. These narcissists don't think they're special. They must be special, because if they aren't, then all that pain was for nothing. And the effects? Oh, they echo. These kids turn into adults who manipulate because it's safer than connecting, who dominate because they don't trust cooperation, who demand loyalty and admiration because the idea of being unworthy is so painful they'd rather burn everything down than face it. Here's the brutal irony. Most of these parents meant well. They weren't trying to create monsters, but intention doesn't erase outcome. Giving your child the emotional equivalent of candy-coated poison is still poison. Erikson points out that even praise, especially praise, needs to be grounded in reality. When a child never hears no, never hears you need to try harder, never learns to face discomfort, they don't develop confidence. They develop entitlement, and entitlement is empathy's enemy. And here's where it gets even uglier. Society rewards these traits. The narcissistic golden child becomes the CEO, the influencer, the politician, the Instagram expert. They're taught that rules are for other people, that image trumps substance, that branding beats integrity. And because they were never taught to respect boundaries, they don't just cross them, they bulldoze them. Erikson makes another crucial distinction. Narcissists often weren't just praised, they were objectified, treated like trophies, paraded like status symbols, loved for how they looked, not who they were. That child doesn't learn to value themselves, they learn to perform. And what happens when the applause stops? Rage, despair, destruction. Because if their worth is tied to admiration, then rejection isn't just painful, it's annihilating. Let's take a minute and be real here. Maybe you were that kid. Maybe you know that kid. Maybe you're raising that kid. The takeaway isn't that narcissists are doomed or that parents are villains. The message is that choices matter. Praise matters, discipline matters. Kids need boundaries as much as they need hugs. Love isn't protection from reality, it's preparation for it. So no, narcissists aren't just born that way. They're built by a perfect storm of overvaluation, trauma, misplaced love, and unchecked ego. And if we're not careful, we'll keep repeating the cycle, one overpraised, under-challenged generation at a time. Key takeaway. Narcissists are not born with crowns. They're handed them, usually by well-meaning parents, emotionally neglectful environments, or a society that rewards performance over authenticity. Narcissism is both nature and nurture, but the nurture part, that's where the warning signs start, and that's where the cycle can be stopped. Favorite quote: convincing the child that they are perfect as they are, better than everybody else even, while simultaneously treating the child like an object and offering no valuable feedback, creates a complex psychological cocktail. The anxious attachment trap. Here's the thing, no one wants to admit. The people most likely to fall for narcissists are usually the ones who think they never would. You know the type. Emotionally intelligent, educated, empathetic, driven, the people who read self-help books and listen to relationship podcasts on 1.5x speed while sipping oat milk lattes. Yeah, you're the perfect mark. because you believe in growth, in redemption, in giving people a chance. And narcissists see that as a flashing, open 24/7 sign over your heart. Thomas Erikson doesn't pull any punches here, and neither will I. He lays it out with painful clarity. Narcissists don't prey on the weak. They prey on the kind, on the helpful, on the hopeful. And before you even know what's happening, you're tangled in a web of, did I do something wrong? While the narcissist grins behind their mask. Let's get this straight. Vulnerability isn't stupidity, it's humanity. But narcissists weaponize it. That friend who always needed a shoulder to cry on, who somehow made you feel bad for their bad behavior, who spun every disagreement into an emotional guilt trip, that wasn't a broken soul. It was a master manipulator who knew empathy is a gateway drug for people pleasers. Erikson hits a nerve when he explains that it's not about how smart you are. In fact, intelligence can backfire. Smart people assume behavior has logic, that if someone is acting irrationally, there must be a reason. You overthink, you rationalize, you project your own integrity onto people who don't even know what the word means, and that's how the trap gets set. You're trying to solve the narcissist like a puzzle, when really they're just a con. Worse, we cling to the myth that only damaged people get manipulated, that if someone is a victim, they must have had low self-esteem. But Erikson breaks that lie in half. Narcissists often go after successful, confident people because those people are more threatening and more rewarding to conquer. You're not being targeted because you're broken. You're being targeted because you shine. And what happens once the narcissist sinks their teeth in? You start to question your instincts. You're told you're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. This is classic gaslighting, and it works because you're already predisposed to self-reflection. Narcissists twist your strength, your introspection, into a weakness, and suddenly you're apologizing for being hurt. You're explaining why your needs matter. You're doubting the very things that made you powerful. Some people are especially vulnerable because of their past. If you grew up in chaos, if your parents taught you that love must be earned, or that attention comes with conditions, you are prime real estate for narcissistic abuse. You confuse drama for connection. You think walking on eggshells is just how love works. And narcissists, they can sniff that out like blood in the water. But let's get uncomfortably honest. Some of you keep walking into these relationships because you're addicted to fixing people. You tell yourself that if you just love hard enough, sacrifice long enough, they'll change. Spoiler, they won't, because narcissists don't want to grow. They want control. And your healing project, it's just ego fuel for them. They're not interested in transformation. They're interested in domination. The trap is subtle. First they flatter, then they isolate, then they chip away at your reality until you're not sure which way is up. And by the time you're wondering how you got here, they've already rewritten the story. You're the problem. You're the one who changed. You're crazy, clingy, dramatic, insecure, whatever label makes them the misunderstood hero in their own twisted fairy tale. Erikson even breaks it down by personality types. The overly responsible types fall hardest. Blues, greens, yellows, reds. Each color comes with a set of triggers the narcissist can exploit. Whether it's your fear of conflict, your obsession with peace, your need for approval, or your love of being needed, it's all ammunition. They tailor their manipulation to your psychological blueprint like it's a shopping list. And don't think just because you've escaped one narcissist, you're immune. They come in different packages: romantic partners, bosses, spiritual leaders, friends. The mask changes, the core doesn't. If you don't learn the signs, you'll keep repeating the cycle. Each time a little more broken, a little more jaded, and a little more convinced that love equals pain. So, here's the tough love. You need to learn the difference between compassion and codependence, between forgiveness and self-destruction. You don't need to stop being kind. You need to start being discerning. Not everyone who cries deserves your empathy. Not every broken person wants to be whole, and not every charming smile is safe. Key takeaway: narcissists don't target the weak. They target the emotionally intelligent. Being empathic, kind, or successful doesn't protect you from narcissists. It paints a target on your back. The more you believe in goodness, the more dangerous you are to them, and the more appealing you become as prey. Favorite quote: narcissists don't seek us out because we're like them. They seek us out because we are their opposites. We are empathic and we have genuine confidence which the narcissists can't emulate. Breaking free, the path to recovery. Let's face it, the greatest con narcissism ever pulled wasn't convincing the world it didn't exist. It was branding itself as confidence, repackaging egomania as self-love, and selling it back to us in TED Talks and Instagram Reels. And we, drooling dopamine chasers that we are, bought it wholesale. But here's the real tragedy. While we were busy curating filtered avatars of ourselves for invisible audiences, we missed the most important revolution of all, the one inside. Not the cringeworthy glow-up narrative with spa days and kale chips, but the deeper, dirtier, bloodier work of self-reckoning. That's where Erikson draws his line in the sand. After spending hundreds of pages slapping us awake to the epidemic of narcissism, he tosses us a brutal mirror and dares us to look. The final act isn't about finger pointing, it's about soul digging. You want to fix the world? Good. Start by tearing the mask off your own face. We begin with the test. Not some Cosmo quiz with cutesy outcomes, but the old Raskin and Terry narcissistic personality inventory, psychologists' favorite tool for decades. You pick between paired statements. It's not complex, but it stings. Because suddenly it's not your ex or your boss or your influencer nemesis being judged. It's you. And the score? Oh, that's just a number. But how you justify it, that's the story. Erikson confesses his own result, a humble 14, average. And that's the hook. Most of us land in the same territory. Not evil, not pure, just dangerously blind to our own subtle poison, because narcissism isn't all grand entrances and gaslighting. Sometimes it's humble bragging, sometimes it's ducking accountability in the name of self-care, sometimes it's snapping at your partner because your need to be right outruns your desire to connect. What comes next is harder than a diagnosis: choice. Because knowing you've got narcissistic traits is one thing, doing something about it is war. And most people, they'd rather stay sleeping soldiers in the comfort of their curated personalities than march into the bloody trench warfare of self-transformation. Erikson's solution is painfully simple and therefore hated. Be the change. Not hashtag activism, not performative allyship. Real change. In your choices, your relationships, your internal narrative. He doesn't coddle you with platitudes. He punches through your screen with existential knives. You want a cure? He dares. Then give more than you take. Help someone who can't help you back. Sit with your discomfort instead of posting through it. Reconsider your material addictions. The new car, the upgraded phone, the validation drip from likes and comments. Ask yourself truly who you're trying to impress. And if you can't answer without shame, you found a route. The brilliance of Erikson's conclusion is that he refuses to let you outsource this journey. Therapists can help, models can inspire, but at the end of the day, if you're not willing to dismantle the tiny empire you've built around your fragile ego, you will remain a benevolent tyrant in your own story. You'll be the good one who just so happens to emotionally drain your friends, dominate every conversation, and label criticism as negativity. Congratulations, you're just a charismatic parasite with a therapist's vocabulary. And for those who want an out, Erikson sees you. He calls you out. He knows you'll scroll past mindfulness tips and humility exercises, too boring or not for you. But what if that's exactly what healing looks like? Boredom, quiet, anonymity, serving others with no reward, not sexy, not viral, but revolutionary in a culture that thrives on self-worship. He doesn't promise transformation will be glamorous. In fact, he warns you, it's the opposite. You'll feel invisible, you'll lose your edge, you'll stop being the most, but you'll gain something else. Peace, integrity, a kind of strength that doesn't scream, just walks steadily in the direction of better. In the end, Erikson drops the mic on this whole performance with a simple challenge. You've spent your life trying to be admired. Try being useful instead. That's the real flex, not self-love, not superiority, service. Key takeaway: Narcissism won't be cured by calling out others. It will be weakened only when we courageously call it out in ourselves and choose a radically unsexy alternative: humility, self-awareness, and service to something bigger than our fragile self-image. Favorite quote: "Every man is guilty of all the good he didn't do." Linda's journey, a case study in narcissism. You ever meet someone so completely disconnected from reality that you wonder if they're starring in a Netflix series only they can see? That's Linda. No, not your neighbor or that girl from yoga. This Linda is a manufactured mirror held up to society's narcissistic underbelly, and what it reflects is horrifyingly familiar. She's the soft-core villain of Erikson's cautionary tale, crafted not to be hated, but to be understood, because understanding Linda is understanding the anatomy of learned narcissism in its purest domestic form. Linda's story doesn't start with a slap or a crime. It starts with passivity, with silence, with 1,000 tiny moments where her parents said yes when they should have said get real. And just like that, a monster wasn't born but built. One expensive apartment, unearned grade, and crisis manipulation at a time. This is not about one person. It's about a system, a household, a culture that confused love with indulgence and parenting with obedience to emotional terrorism. Thomas Erikson isn't playing nice here, and neither will we. You want an intervention? Fine, but before we talk about what to do with a Linda, we have to dissect what made her possible. And no, it's not just Instagram's fault. Linda, on the surface, is a fairly normal, well-dressed, social media saturated college student. She's got the perfectly curated feed, the apartment her parents bought because 8 a.m. classes were too early, and a support system trained like circus animals to jump at her tears and tantrums. You've probably met 10 Lindas. Hell, you might have been one, but the red flags come fast. She's got a social circle wider than a politician's promises and emotional depth you could drown in, if a puddle counted as deep. This isn't about being spoiled. Spoiled is what happens when a kid gets too many toys. Linda weaponizes guilt. She cries to control, threatens suicide to get rent paid. She blackmails her professors with claims of discrimination to cover for academic laziness. She manipulates her father into buying her makeup that costs more annually than his entire wardrobe. This is what we call narcissistic scaffolding. Not born, assembled. Now, you might be tempted to scream, "Where were the parents?" And Erikson answers, right there, cleaning her floors, folding her laundry, bankrolling her future sense of entitlement. Her mother, a character more spineless than a jellyfish in a blender, tries once to say Linda should do her own laundry, only to back down the moment crocodile tears start flowing. And Daddy? Well, Daddy's a walking wallet with a guilt complex. Fast forward, and Linda finally hits the wall. Adulthood. Her boss expects work, not excuses. Her peers outgrow the Instagram reality distortion bubble. Her father finally utters the sacred words she's never heard. No. Her meltdown, predictable. She doesn't recalibrate, she retaliates. Accusations, manipulation, even suicide threats. Again. And here lies the tragedy. She believes her pain is unjust. She is the protagonist of a story where every critic is a villain and every denial is an attack. Erikson doesn't let her off the hook, but he also doesn't drag her into the flames. What he does is sneak a scalpel into your hand and says, cut deeper, because Linda's not just Linda. Linda is the child of a narcissistic culture. She isn't some rare anomaly. She's the consequence of an environment that rewards charm over character, attention over action, and victimhood over accountability. This isn't a personality disorder. It's a social cancer, and she's just a symptom. So how do you help someone like Linda? First, abandon the savior complex. You can't fix what someone refuses to see as broken. Linda isn't asking for help. She's asking for applause. And when you offer advice, be prepared. Because buried in every "you should do this" is a silent accusation. You've been doing it wrong. And narcissists, especially those who don't know they are one, don't process critique. They process betrayal. But let's say you try anyway. Erikson's got 2 words: listen first, then listen again. Wait until the performative sobbing subsides, until the justifications thin out. And then, maybe, Maybe there's a crack where a real conversation can happen, but don't count on it, because here's the final twist. Linda might not be the villain at all. She might just be the inevitable result of an era obsessed with personal branding, parental enabling, and a society that taught her love is measured in attention, and the pain is a currency you can spend to get your way. She is what happens when nobody says enough. And so, what's the takeaway here? It's not that Linda is broken beyond repair. It's that if you want to change someone like her, you have to change the ecosystem that nurtures her, challenge the culture of silence, of support that's really submission, because if you don't, the next Linda won't just be in your workplace or family, she'll be you. Key takeaway: narcissism is rarely born in a vacuum. It's cultivated by families that fear conflict more than chaos, by societies that confuse empathy with indulgence, and by individuals who trade responsibility for comfort until both are bankrupt. Helping someone like Linda doesn't start with fixing her. It starts with no longer excusing her. Favorite quote: helping someone who doesn't want to be helped is like trying to hug somebody who would prefer a fistfight. The narcissistic society. Ever wonder what happens when narcissism isn't just a trait, it's a trend? When it stops being a clinical diagnosis and becomes the cultural wallpaper we all pretend not to see? Welcome to the apocalypse in selfie format. Not the dramatic fire raining from the sky kind. No, this is slower, deadlier, the kind of collapse that comes not with a bang, but with an Instagram filter and a TikTok dance about trauma that's oddly on beat. We live in an age where personal branding trumps personal growth, where a child's opinion on vacation destinations carries more weight than their GPA, and where influencers are paid to eat cereal like it's performance art. That's not just annoying, that's systemic. That's a narcissistic culture. And Thomas Erikson isn't just hinting at it, he's dragging it out by the hair, forcing it into the spotlight and saying, look at this mess. This isn't about shaming individuals. This is about identifying the sludge we're all swimming in. The modern world has done a brilliant job of rewarding narcissistic behavior while disguising it as confidence, hustle, ambition, or, my personal favorite, being unapologetically yourself. What does that even mean anymore? That you're allowed to trample social norms and basic decency because your authentic self prefers the view from the center of attention? Erikson's thesis is nuclear. Narcissistic traits are no longer rare. They're celebrated. And if you think that sounds dramatic, consider this. He compares the rise of narcissism to the obesity epidemic. Think about that. Entire generations are being raised on a psychological diet of validation, attention, and aesthetic perfection. The result? Emotional obesity. People so bloated with self-importance they can't fit through the door of humility. He doesn't pull these ideas from thin air. He builds on research by Jean Twenger and W. Keith Campbell, who basically declared narcissism the new cultural plague. And they weren't being metaphorical. Like any virus, narcissism spreads through exposure via reality shows, influencers, and even parenting philosophies built around fragile egos and participation trophies. When every toddler is told they're a little king or queen, don't act shocked when they grow up demanding tribute instead of offering value. Let's talk about Bruno the blogger, Erikson's fictional proxy for the social media narcissist. Bruno has built a career on cutting people down with smug sarcasm and performative cruelty. He's paid to be vicious, adored for being heartless, and protected by the same mob that would cancel anyone who dared call out his behavior. Until someone punches back, then suddenly Bruno is the victim and we're all expected to cry with him. Classic narcissistic whiplash. And guess what? Bruno isn't an outlier. He's a blueprint. The more outrageous the behavior, the more clicks it earns. Society has monetized narcissism and wrapped it in a shiny UX design. TikTok rewards drama. Instagram rewards unattainable perfection. Twitter rewards hot takes with all the nuance of a car alarm. And we wonder why empathy is in short supply. But let's not just rage at the influencers. Narcissistic culture is in our homes. Parents piling debt to keep up appearances. kids dictating the terms of discipline, schools lowering grading standards to avoid bruised egos, and university students so emotionally brittle they shout down opposing views rather than engage with them. We've taken the worst parts of narcissism, entitlement, deflection, performative outrage, and turned them into badges of honor. And here's the psychological death spiral. You can become a narcissist just by playing along. Erikson warns that repeated exposure to narcissistic behavior, even if you reject it, can influence you. It's environmental conditioning, like passive smoking, but instead of cancer, you get an inflated sense of self and zero tolerance for criticism. At its core, Erikson's argument is brutally simple. This culture is not just breeding narcissists, it's normalizing them. We've lowered the bar so far, we're applauding people for stepping over it like it's the Olympic high jump. And the worst part? The truly narcissistic don't suffer. We do. The ones still trying to navigate relationships, workplaces, and institutions that now operate according to the rules of emotional predators in yoga pants. If you've ever wondered why people can't take feedback, why apologies sound like PR statements, or why your group chat feels like a hostage negotiation, congratulations, you're living in the consequences. And no, Erikson doesn't pretend to have a cure. That's not the point. The point is to call it what it is, not a phase, not a quirk, but a collective psychological rot that, if left unchecked, will turn every space, digital or real, into a mirror maze of people screaming "love me" without even asking if they're lovable. Key takeaway: when narcissism stops being an exception and becomes the culture, the damage isn't just personal, it's systemic. If we don't slam the brakes on this feedback loop of ego and validation, we won't just be surrounded by narcissists, we'll be absorbed by them. Favorite quote? What kinds of behavior are vicious bloggers and narcissistic podcasters encouraging in others? You get my point. Collective narcissism and aggression. You think narcissism's bad when it's one person? Wait until it goes airborne. What we're talking about now isn't just some emotionally stunted boyfriend or a TikTok influencer with a god complex. No, this is narcissism with nukes. This is narcissism that votes, protests, organizes, radicalizes, and wages digital and psychological war from the safe anonymity of a comment section. You've heard of toxic individuals. Welcome to the toxic hive mind. Thomas Erikson takes us straight into the heart of this collective fever dream, where it's not just about one person needing to be admired. Now it's an entire group, a political faction, a religious sect, a fan base, a team, or even a damn knitting club demanding reverence like it's a human right. And woe unto you if you even breathe a dissenting thought. Collective narcissism doesn't just want validation, it demands submission. These aren't people hoping you'll agree with them. They're people who think disagreement is treason. They don't ask questions. They excommunicate anyone who does. They don't want a conversation. They want conformity, not harmony, uniformity. If everyone's not playing the trumpet in their orchestra, you're not in the band. You're the enemy. Erikson's not just describing political mobs here, he's painting a picture of a psychological structure that's metastasizing across society. Think. Fanatical loyalty, binary thinking, and outrage addiction. They pick a hill to die on and set up camp. Any positive trait the group holds is exaggerated to godlike levels. Any negative, ignored, denied, or blamed on the others. What emerges is a delusional feedback loop where the group convinces itself it's not only right, but righteous. That's not a movement. That's a cult with better lighting. Now here's the kicker. This brand of narcissism doesn't even require individual self-esteem. In fact, studies show collective narcissists are often riddled with insecurity. They're angry, paranoid, constantly aggrieved. Their group isn't fighting for progress, it's fighting for vengeance, retribution, respect that was never earned but always expected, and they'll attack you for even suggesting otherwise. You're not disagreeing with a policy or an opinion, you're violating their identity. Erikson lays out the psychological blueprint like it's a bomb schematic. Step 1. Identify a perceived threat, real or imaginary, it doesn't matter. Step 2. Amplify the outrage until it drowns out logic. Step 3. Punish anyone who deviates. Step 4. Claim victimhood while lobbing emotional grenades at anyone who questions the narrative. Rinse, repeat, cancel. And yes, he drags in examples. Brexit, MAGA, leftist cancel mobs, far-right extremists, all the way down to local Facebook groups that riot over zoning laws. He's not choosing sides, he's exposing all of them. Because narcissism doesn't lean left or right, it leans inward with a megaphone and no self-awareness. Here's where it gets diabolical. Social media is their playground. Because in this environment, aggression is viral, nuance is DOA, and the narcissistic collective, it thrives on outrage. Posts don't go viral because they're thoughtful, they go viral because they're incendiary. Entire algorithms are now built to serve narcissistic rage on demand. The dopamine loop is infinite, and we're all just a few angry scrolls away from assimilation. So, how does this end? Spoiler, it doesn't. Erikson makes one thing clear: collective narcissism isn't going away. If anything, it's scaling up. The more people feel invisible, the more they cling to identity groups for validation. And when those identities are wrapped in entitlement and paranoia, you don't get empowerment, you get fanaticism. Here's your wake-up call. You don't have to be a narcissist to participate in this mess. Just being in proximity to it makes you susceptible. Laugh at the wrong meme, comment on the wrong post, suddenly you're being digitally executed by a mob that doesn't even know your last name. And once that swarm locks on, good luck finding your reputation intact. We're past the point of asking, how did this happen? The real question is, how much of this behavior are we normalizing just to survive in a world run by collective egos? Because if you've started holding back opinions, if you're walking on eggshells around ideologies that used to be discussions, congrats, you're already adapting to the swarm. This isn't about fixing the world in one TED talk, it's about naming the enemy. And it isn't the other side, it's the demand that no side ever be questioned. That criticism equals oppression. That disagreement is assault. We need friction, debate, correction, not emotional dictatorships disguised as group solidarity. Key takeaway: when narcissism jumps from individuals to collectives, it becomes ideological warfare. And the victims? Truth, dialogue, and anyone brave enough to think independently. Favorite quote: they genuinely believe they are the only people to see the world for what it really is, and that their opinion is the only reasonable one. Self-esteem, the double-edged sword. You've been lied to, not maliciously, maybe not even intentionally, but certainly relentlessly. Every poster telling you to just believe in yourself, every influencer whispering about manifesting your truth, and every well-meaning adult who insisted you could be anything if you just thought positively enough. Yeah, all of them helped create a monster, not the kind that eats cities, worse, the kind that feels so good about doing nothing that it doesn't even notice it's doing nothing. We called it self-esteem, and it's killing us softly, one inflated ego at a time. Let's get real. The cult of self-esteem started with the purest of intentions. Help people love themselves, build up the beaten down, give every kid a trophy just for existing, and maybe they won't cry in the bathroom or turn into resentful failures. But then, somehow, it spiraled. Like Frankenstein's monster wearing a crop top and using hashtags like #blessed. And Erikson is here, scalpel in hand, ready to dissect it without anesthesia. You think high self-esteem is the golden ticket? Think again. Erikson walks us into a psychological train wreck involving two groups of students. One group just gets their homework, no fanfare, no fluff, no motivational speeches. The other, weekly emails dripping in artificial positivity, telling them they're destined for greatness, referencing fake studies about how awesome people like them usually do. Fast forward to test day. Group A performs the same. Group B, their scores nosedive like a budget airline in a thunderstorm. But here's the kicker, they feel amazing about it. Delusion dressed up as confidence. Narcissism in yoga pants. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more we obsess about how special we are, the less inclined we are to actually become special. Self-esteem without effort is like trying to heat your house with a scented candle. Looks nice, does nothing. Erikson isn't saying you should hate yourself, he's saying maybe stop treating your self-image like a shrine. There's a massive gap between liking yourself and worshipping yourself. And the latter, that's where narcissism blooms like mold in the basement of your psyche. Erikson rips apart the myth that confidence automatically equals competence. In fact, the data says otherwise. He drops the hammer with that South Korean math stat. American kids believed in themselves way more than their South Korean counterparts, but when it came time to actually do math, they got annihilated. Turns out feeling like a genius doesn't make you one, it just makes the fall from reality a lot farther. And then there's the generational myth. We've all heard the trope. Narcissists are secretly insecure. They're just wounded little puppies underneath all that arrogance. Erikson throws that idea out the window like bad leftovers. No. Most narcissists don't hate themselves deep down, quite the opposite. They adore themselves with the intensity of 1,000 filtered selfies. They think they're better than you. And while you're sitting there wondering how to help them heal, they're plotting how to get ahead by taking credit for your work and gaslighting you into apologizing for noticing. We've confused self-love with self-delusion. We've confused compassion with coddling. Somewhere along the way, we stopped telling people, you can do better, and started screaming, you're perfect just the way you are, even when they were clearly a flaming disaster in progress. Erikson doesn't want you to hate yourself. He wants you to shut up, get to work, and realize that true confidence doesn't come from mantras. It comes from results. You don't need less self-esteem. You need less empty self-esteem, praise without effort, affirmation without accountability, and trophies for breathing. This is the junk food of personal development. Feels good going in, kills your drive. And worst of all, it feeds narcissism like gasoline feeds fire. Because the moment you convince someone they're already extraordinary, you rob them of the hunger that creates actual greatness. And the most savage twist? Narcissists score high on self-esteem tests, like scarily high. Not fake it till you make it. These people genuinely believe they're the best. It's not insecurity wrapped in bravado. It's delusion wrapped in entitlement. They're not trying to compensate for a lack of confidence. They're weaponizing it. And they don't need therapy. They need reality. A cold, hard dose of it, without sugar, filters, or participation trophies. So here's the punch in the throat. If you want to protect society from narcissism, stop mass producing it. Stop feeding the idea that feeling good about yourself is more important than being good at anything. Stop confusing sensitivity with fragility, because not everyone who feels great about themselves is healthy, and not everyone who questions themselves is broken. Sometimes the guy doubting himself is just self-aware, and sometimes the one who isn't is the problem. Key takeaway: self-esteem isn't a free pass to excellence. When handed out without merit, it breeds narcissism, undermines performance, and insulates people from the very discomfort that would have driven them to grow. Favorite quote: the opposite of obesity isn't anorexia. There is a whole range of attitudes that lie somewhere between self-hatred and narcissism. Manipulation tactics uncovered. You've been taught to trust people based on what they say. That's adorable. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, every word, every glance, every carefully chosen pause in a sentence is a loaded weapon. Not because they're smarter than you, not because they're more emotionally intelligent, but because they don't care. They're not burdened with your empathy. They're not wasting time questioning if what they're doing is morally okay. They're strategizing, calculating, and manipulating with a level of commitment that would make a con artist blush. Welcome to the theater of narcissistic control, where you're cast as the fool and the villain at the same time. Thomas Erikson drags the curtain back on this circus with no apologies. You want to know how narcissists manipulate? You better be ready to get uncomfortable, because the answer is every way humanly possible. They use love like a drug dealer uses a free sample. The first hit is euphoric. You feel seen, adored, invincible. But the moment you're hooked, the dealer becomes the jailer, and the same "I love you" becomes "you're lucky I even noticed you." Erikson breaks down their tactics like a seasoned profiler. They start with love bombing, relentless praise, wild passion, and over-the-top gifts. Not because you're so amazing, but because they're laying a trap. It's a mirage of intimacy designed to get you to open the vault. Your insecurities, your dreams, your childhood trauma. Why? Because they're building a database of weapons, and your vulnerability is ammunition. Then comes the arbitrary feedback loop. One day you're a genius, a god, a muse. The next, useless, annoying, pathetic. And they won't tell you why the switch flipped. That's intentional, because now you're chasing the high of approval, like a lab rat who once got cheese and is now pressing buttons until it dies of confusion. Narcissists thrive on this chaos. They control the narrative. You'll find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do and defending them to friends who see what you're too fogged up to acknowledge. Want to know the most grotesque part? They will use your own emotions against you. They'll say, "Why are you so sensitive?" as they trample your boundaries. They'll accuse you of being controlling when you try to set expectations. They'll shift focus with surgical precision. Anytime you get close to the truth, the conversation pivots to your flaws, your reactions, your tone, and suddenly you're the narcissist. They're just the misunderstood hero in this emotional hostage drama. And let's not forget the crowd pleaser. Gaslighting, that psychological sleight of hand where reality itself becomes negotiable. You didn't see what you saw, you didn't hear what you heard, and if you react, well, now you're unstable, crazy, overreacting. Erikson doesn't sugarcoat it. Gaslighting is mental warfare, and narcissists use it with chilling regularity. But it doesn't stop there. Narcissists aren't lone wolves. They often recruit flying monkeys, friends, family members, colleagues, people who believe the facade and will unknowingly, or sometimes knowingly, pressure you to conform, to forgive, to stay quiet. Suddenly, your pain becomes your burden to carry in silence because they're such a nice person to everyone else. Welcome to isolation. It's one of their favorite tools. So what's the antidote? Erikson gives it to you bluntly. Boundaries and consequences. Stop justifying. Stop negotiating with someone who doesn't argue in good faith. Don't waste your breath hoping they'll understand. Understanding isn't the issue. Control is. And if you won't play the role they wrote for you, they'll discard you. But that's not a loss. That's your liberation. You don't confront narcissists by calling them out. You confront them by becoming immune to their validation. You walk away without the dramatic send-off. You starve them of attention. And yes, sometimes you just get the hell out. No therapy session, no closure, no apology. Just a clean exit and a locked door behind you. Because here's the hard truth. Narcissists won't stop. They won't change. And they certainly won't wake up one day and decide to respect your feelings. Your job isn't to fix them. It's to stop being a pawn in their twisted little game. Key takeaway. Narcissists don't manipulate with brute force. They manipulate with charm, empathy mimicry, and emotional sleight of hand, weaponizing your vulnerabilities until your sense of self dissolves. Recognizing their tactics is your first and most powerful defense. Favorite quote, "One of the worst forms of manipulation is when your own emotions are turned against you." The road to empowerment. You've scrolled through 100 Instagram profiles of strangers posing like prophets, bought a gratitude journal you'll never open again, and maybe even taken a yoga class or two while rage scrolling the news. And still, you wonder, why doesn't this feel like growth? Why, despite all the podcasts and self-care rituals, do you still feel like a hollowed out version of a human being? Because you haven't done the one thing this culture has engineered you to avoid at all costs. Take honest, sustained accountability for your own narcissistic tendencies. Yeah, I said it. You, me, us. All of us. Welcome to the black mirror of self-reflection, and this time there's no flattering angle. Erikson isn't playing games anymore. This part of the book is a trapdoor under your comfort zone. He starts by asking a question you were probably too scared or too smug to ask yourself. What if you are the narcissist? Before you panic post a denial on Facebook, breathe. Because the truth is that narcissistic traits aren't some elite dysfunction reserved for sociopaths in suits. They're woven into the social DNA of modern life. The only difference between the average person and a diagnosable narcissist is degree and frequency. Think of it like sugar addiction. Just because you're not pouring maple syrup in your coffee doesn't mean you're sugar-free. Erikson hands us the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, a psychological Rorschach test disguised as a quiz. You're asked to choose between statements like, I have a natural talent for influencing people, and I'm not good at influencing people. Which one do you pick? Because if you said the first, congratulations, you just scored a point for narcissism. But wait, does that actually mean you're a narcissist? That's the uncomfortable brilliance here. Erikson exposes how arbitrary self-perception really is. Most people don't answer based on truth. They answer based on how they wish they were seen. The test doesn't reveal who you are. It reveals who you're performing as. That illusion you crafted in your head, that's what's taking the test for you. But he doesn't stop at testing. No. Erikson goes for the jugular. He demands you stop fixating on the score and start interrogating your motivations. Why do you need validation from strangers? Why do you inflate your worth in subtle ways? Why do you feel crushed when someone else succeeds? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're flashlights for the parts of your soul you've left in the dark. Your quirky ambition might actually be unchecked entitlement. Your confidence might be ego wrapped in a social justice cape. Wake up. Then he gets even more brutal. Transformation isn't about cutting out narcissism like it's a tumor. It's about learning to redirect it. You want admiration? Earn it by actually doing something that improves other people's lives. You crave attention? Be the kind of person who's worth paying attention to. Don't scream, I am enough, at your reflection. Go out and be enough. You want power? Then build something better than yourself and give it away. Real self-worth doesn't come from affirmations or social media detoxes. It comes from putting in the damn work when nobody's watching. Erikson lays out the roadmap with zero sugarcoating. Start small, succeed at something hard, tell someone about it, teach it to someone else. That cycle, that's the biochemical path to self-esteem. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, the real trio of inner peace. Not likes, not clout, just raw, earned self-respect. He warns of the dopamine trap, the addiction to short-term rewards that social media and hustle culture feed on. Narcissists live off that fast hit. But growth? That's slow dopamine, that's resilience and delayed gratification and failing publicly without quitting. That's where your identity stops being a performance and starts being a foundation. And if you're still waiting for the world to change so you don't have to, bad news. You are the world. You are the culture. If you're tired of being surrounded by narcissists, then stop acting like one. Step out of the cycle. Set the example. Don't beg society to get better, be better. Because ultimately, Erikson's message isn't look out for narcissists, it's look in the damn mirror. You either contribute to the problem or you become the change. There is no third option. Key takeaway, the battle against narcissism starts within. You can't just spot narcissists, you must be brave enough to identify and uproot those tendencies in yourself. Transformation doesn't come from exposure. It comes from radical, actionable humility. Favorite quote, every man is guilty of all the good he didn't do. Reflecting on the past. Here's where we start seeing the full-length mirror pointed back at society, and it ain't pretty. Think of this as that moment in the movie where the villain has a glorious monologue and suddenly you realize, wait, are we the villain? What's laid bare here is how we stumbled, face first, into the swamp of narcissistic dysfunction, not by accident, but by choosing to ignore every flashing red warning light on the way. The idea that narcissism snuck up on us like a clever little virus isn't entirely true. No, we sent it a golden invitation, lit fireworks in its honor, and then complained when it trashed the living room. The author throws us back into the past, decades ago, pointing fingers at cultural shifts that, while liberating in some ways, also chipped away at our psychological stability. When rules were tossed out in the name of freedom during the 1970s, we didn't just burn the rulebook, we pretended it never existed. Suddenly, being you, loudly, selfishly, proudly, was the new ideal. And why not? It's far easier to talk about how unique and special you are than to actually be of service to someone else. Self-esteem turned into self-worship. Self-expression morphed into self-obsession, and it's all wrapped up in a neon ribbon of authenticity. Erikson's view isn't just a lecture on nostalgia, it's a fierce critique of how modern culture inflates the ego while starving empathy. We didn't become narcissistic because the devil made us do it. We did it because it's easier to take selfies than take responsibility. The book zeroes in on the subtle, sneaky ways the elevation of extroversion, self-esteem movements, and the decay of humility poisoned the well. When we replaced introspection with Instagram and personal growth with performance, we stopped growing at all. It's as if the human potential movement, which once pointed toward becoming your best self, was hijacked by influencers screaming, "Look at me," while standing on metaphorical and sometimes literal yachts. Then comes the commentary on parenting, a landmine field of, do you want dumpling stew, or should I make you a bespoke quinoa avocado bowl, my liege? Parents, too exhausted to parent, have become emotional baristas, customizing life for children who now believe preferences are right and discomfort is oppression. Erikson delivers a brutal truth here. If you raise your kid to believe the sun revolves around them, don't act shocked when they burn everyone in their orbit. They're not spoiled by accident, they're trained. The text also drags collective narcissism through the mud, and deservedly so. It's not just about individuals anymore, it's about the mob. Online, everyone's an icon, an expert, a demigod with a ring light. And the internet? It's no longer a place of information, it's a mirror maze, with every reflection demanding applause. You're either performing, judging, or being judged. Likes, retweets, shares, they're the currency of ego now. Narcissism isn't just a glitch in the human psyche, it's baked into the software of society. But don't mistake this for a hopeless rant. Erikson gives the reader that gut punch wake-up call. If we can't take an honest look in the mirror and acknowledge how we ended up here, we'll never find the door out. His writing is both a slap and a map. Here's the twist though, the book never goes full doomsday. Instead, it forces you to confront the grotesque yet seductive machinery of modern self-centeredness, and then dares you to step off the ride. It's a call to reflect, not deflect, to stop blaming TikTok or millennials or the 70s and start owning our role in this bloated beast of cultural narcissism. So, what's the one thing to remember when you finally close this chapter? You are not immune. That righteous indignation you feel, that too might be narcissism in disguise. We are all both the problem and the potential cure. If you're not actively resisting the gravitational pull of ego, you're being dragged by it. Key takeaway, cultural narcissism didn't appear out of thin air. It was cultivated generation by generation with each shift toward freedom, empowerment, and self-love, pushing us closer to a society where validation became the new virtue. Favorite quote, there are always four sides to a story. Your side, their side, the truth, and what really happened. Helping Linda and others like her. There's always that one person in the group who somehow manages to suck the air out of every conversation. You know the type. They don't need facts, only feelings. They don't need responsibility, just applause. And when things go wrong, because let's be honest, they always do, it's somehow never their fault. That, my friend, is the tragic opera that is Linda's life. And if you think you're above it, guess again. Society didn't create Linda in a vacuum. We applauded her selfies, co-signed her delusions, and let our silence pass as permission. And now we're shocked? Please. Linda's story isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a siren screaming that narcissistic culture is no longer the exception, but the rule. And before you pat yourself on the back thinking, well, at least I'm not like that, ask yourself, when was the last time you interrupted someone's delusion with a cold, hard truth? Or better yet, when was the last time you let someone wallow in victimhood because it was easier than confronting their mess? Yeah, exactly. Erikson brings Linda back for one last flaming encore, not to shame her, but to shine a floodlight on the rest of us. Linda's problem is less about personal failure and more about cultural permission. She isn't a diagnosed narcissist. No clipboard-wielding psychiatrist labeled her NPD. She's just the unfortunate poster child of a culture that rewards performance over authenticity, manipulation over accountability, and noise over nuance. She's us, just without the self-awareness. Now, the million-dollar question: can she be saved? Can any of us be? The answer is uncomfortably honest, only if we're willing to get brutally uncomfortable. Helping a Linda isn't about sending them a YouTube link on toxic traits or recommending therapy between texts. It's about doing the one thing most people can't stomach: telling them the truth. Not the sugar-coated kind, not the version wrapped in validation, the real kind. The kind that sounds like betrayal because it dares to confront the monster we helped create. Here's where it gets raw. Erikson lays it out. Advice is always a form of criticism. No one gives advice when things are going well, which means the moment you suggest change, you're implying there's a problem. And if Linda doesn't think there's a problem, spoiler alert, she doesn't. Your helpful suggestions are just attacks dressed in concern. That's why you can't start with advice. You have to start with listening, and then listening some more. Not the performative kind, but the kind that lets someone expose themselves without realizing it. Only then, when the cracks are visible, can you point out the foundation's rotting. But let's be real, most people aren't going to make it that far. Not because they're incapable, but because they're too damn comfortable. Comfort is the narcotic of narcissistic culture. It's why people like Linda coast through life with Instagram-ready breakdowns and GoFundMe recoveries. We've turned real help into an act of war. So, yes, stepping in to save a Linda is risky. You might lose the friendship. You might be villainized. You might become the bad guy in her next Facebook rant. But what's the alternative? Letting another person spiral into emotional bankruptcy while we play therapist for likes? The real solution lies not in fixing Linda, but in fixing our tolerance for this kind of dysfunction. If there's a Linda in your life, you have two options: pretend everything's fine and become part of the problem, or grow a spine, challenge the narrative, and risk being labeled the villain in someone else's pity play. Guess which one actually makes a difference? This isn't a Hallmark ending. We don't get to wrap this up with a bow. Linda might never change, but you can. You can stop feeding the beast with silence and start confronting it with compassion backed by courage. Because narcissistic culture doesn't survive on narcissists alone, it survives on enablers. Key takeaway: the root of cultural narcissism isn't just in the individuals behaving badly, it's in the silence, the inaction, and the collective refusal to confront people like Linda with the truth. Change starts not with them, but with us. Favorite quote: to confront a person with his own shadow is to show him his own light. Conclusion. So here we are, standing at the edge of the battlefield, a little more aware, a little less naive, and hopefully a lot more dangerous to the narcissists who've been feasting on your silence. 14 chapters later, and if there's one thing this book made excruciatingly clear, it's this: narcissism isn't just a personality flaw, it's a cultural epidemic we've all been breathing in like secondhand smoke. And whether you've been the victim, the enabler, or let's be honest, occasionally the narcissist yourself, you don't walk away from this book unchanged. Thomas Erikson didn't write this to coddle you, he wrote it to snap you out of your delusion. This isn't a self-help manual for passive readers. It's a wake-up call wrapped in barbed wire. And if you're still pretending narcissism is someone else's problem, you've already lost. This book doesn't ask you to fix everyone. It dares you to fix you, so you stop feeding the fire. And if you haven't bought the book yet, go get it. Seriously. Don't just sponge the highlights. Read the whole damn thing. Own the knowledge. Because being surrounded by narcissists isn't the real problem. Staying silent while they thrive is.